We don't. Good morning, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Joint Powers Authority of the San Francisco Creek, and I'd like to call the meeting to order and have roll call.
Director Abrica,
Here.
Director Combs,
Here.
Director Byrd,
Here.
Director Kremen,
Here.
and we are expecting Director Pine.
Yes. Okay, so we have a quorum. Our next item is approval of the agenda, and
So moved.
okay, have a motion by Director Byrd. I'll second it. And also we could have, if we could have a roll call vote on that.
Director Abrica,
Yes.
Director Combs,
Yes.
Director Byrd,
Yes.
Director Kremen.
Here.
Okay. All right. So the the next item on our agenda is just a welcome, and I want to make a few introductory remarks, and then we'll have our facilitator and our director take it from there. So I definitely want to thank everyone for taking time today, board members, staff, and members of the public, and for participating in this. It's kind of a detailed agenda, if you can see, and we did some brainstorming, myself and Margaret and Charles, to, I think, provide an opportunity for wide-ranging discussion, but also kind of stayed focused on, you know, some specific and important tasks that that we have before us as a board. And you know, I think today it will give us an opportunity to kind of regroup, hopefully, and I know we already see some, you know, people from our different agencies who are present, and I think we'll have a you know, a morning that can sort of update us on certain things, maybe clarify some issues, and ultimately, I think, offer an opportunity for the board to, at least in my view, to kind of focus on what's coming up this year, some of the key goals that we can formulate. So, you know, for me specifically, I think that working within the 3-year comprehensive plan that our director presented to us, feels important for the board to formulate a few, not too many, but a few key strategic goals for this coming year, just so that they're always present before us, that we focus our work and our staff and the public can be sort of on the same page. And then I think the timing now is such that it's sort of coinciding with our fiscal year, which often I think with goals, you know, we have calendar year goals, and then we have the reality of the budget and the fiscal cycle. And I think in this case, they sort of come together. So yeah, the last thing I'll say is that we definitely will be respectful of time. We want to finish by 12 o'clock, no later than 12 o'clock, and maybe even a little earlier if we're optimistic. And so the last item on the agenda, I do want to mention that we left one item pending in our last regular meeting, and that was the participation of board members in the Stanford Searsville advisory group. And so I did consult with our counsel, and you know, her suggestion was that the chair appoint 2 people. So when we get to that item, I have a couple of suggestions how we can arrive at having, you know, two of us participate. So whatever the board wishes at that point. So now I want to just, you know, turn over basically the meeting over to our facilitator, Charles, who will also do a little review of what we have before us today, and then we'll just move along. So yeah, so Charles and Margaret, maybe you want to take it.
I'm sorry, just one moment. I do want to recognize that Director Pine has joined.
All right, so Director Pine is here also. Okay, so Charles.
Right. Thank you, Ruben. Good morning, everyone. As Ruben said, that Margaret, Ruben, and I have been working on a structure for today. So I'm going to briefly cover that. I've also talked to each of the board members to get their input on sort of what would make today a productive day. Just a quick overview of our purpose and the agenda, if you will. The key things we want to try to do today are really to step back and think strategically. Hopefully your phones and emails are not going off on a Saturday morning, so you have some time to do that and think in the big picture about the organization. We also want to use the time here in this conversation to increase the understanding and alignment among the board members, between the board members and staff, and even with the public members who are participating today. We've structured the agenda to focus on sort of the goals and priorities in key areas for the organization. And as Ruben said, we want to identify those near-term strategies and actions that can really focus and align the organization in the next year or two, particularly. And all of this is intended to give clear direction to staff on these key issues so that they have a clear sense of purpose and direction for all the things the organization is trying to accomplish. So the structure of the discussions is that we want to start with some introductions and warm up. And in that, we want to, I'm actually going to ask each of you to share something personal, since we're all sitting at home. So a little show and tell, if you will. So here's your advance warning on that. Look around the room and see what you might want to share. But then we want to focus on the work plan, the 3-year work plan. Margaret's going to give an overview of that. We want to talk about the key goals, particularly from the board members, what they see as the key goals. We're then going to talk about the vision and mission, and we have suggested revisions to sort of kick off that or provoke that conversation and hear from folks as to are there changes in the vision and mission that ought to be incorporated. Then we're going to start drilling down a little bit more in the projects and particularly the issue of funding that came up from everybody as I talked to them. So we want to open that conversation, explore the funding for the major projects and programs that are underway. So we have some discussion time on that. And then lastly, we want to touch base briefly on the organizational capacity and budget. That's really going to be shaped by the earlier conversations this morning to see if there are some things to address on capacity and budget. And then lastly, just pulling things together into action items and direction to staff. So that's the flow. As you can see, it's a lot of content today. So we're trying to put some structure on it, but we want the conversation to be free flowing. So along those lines, if we go to the next slide.
Yep, come on. There we go.
So just some notes on sort of the procedures and logistics. what we're going to do is start the conversation with board and staff discussion. Our intent is to have this as an open, informal discussion, but we definitely want to hear, particularly first from the board members, but we also want to include all the staff that are here participating in the conversation. I'm going to leave that fairly open, so unmute yourself as needed to join the conversation. If you would rather raise your hand to get into the queue, feel free to do that. The raise hand function, if it's not in display in your menu at the bottom, open the panelists, the participants panel for the panelists, and there's a raise hand item at the bottom. I don't know exactly what it shows up as on your screen. Again, we have a lot to talk about today, so please be concise, but feel free to join the conversation, because that's what's going to really make it productive, is to hear from everybody. For those of you who are participating from the public, we have put on the agenda several opportunities to hear from you. So we will pause at particular times and give you an opportunity. Again, if you raise your hand, if you have something to say at those times, we'll unmute you. And if you could keep your comments brief to 3 minutes or less, that would be great. And then the Q&A function is available to the public. So if you have additional comments, feel free to write them in there. So we can include that into the discussions and follow-up actions. I think that's it on the procedures. So with that, I think are there any questions about that? Or, I guess one other thing is, it would be helpful if you could keep your video on, unless you have some technical issue, just because as a facilitator, I like to see people. And so if you could keep your video on, that'd be great. Okay, Margaret, anything else that we want to cover at this outset?
No, I think just a very brief comment that some of the information that we'll be sharing later in the retreat is fairly detailed. It's that 3-year rolling work plan. It's the table that shows the current reach to funding and funding gaps, snapshot in time, and also the members' agreement outstanding issues. This is not a time for us to go into great detail in each of these things. It's an opportunity for us to daylight some of the high-level issues, what comments and thoughts people have, and an opportunity for us to focus our follow-up. So know that this is not going to be the setting where we completely come to a final statement or a final understanding. It's just giving us direction for those things. And with that, I think we can move on.
Okay, so introduction and warm up.
Sorry.
So if I want to go around the group that's here on, your name, your organization, a little show and tell, something that you want to share about your home environment. It could be a pet, could be a family member, it could be something on the shelf. And then a couple of questions. If you could speak briefly to kind of what inspires you about the JPA, and then what special perspective or skills or experience do you add to the mix here in the conversation? What do you think you bring that's special about you? So I'll start with show and tell. So see if I can do this without. So my show and tell is this is the last dance performance I was in. It was back in 2019. I'm in a dance company called the Don't Quit Your Day Job Dancers. And I have not quit my day job yet. But we have been off the stage since 2019 for obvious reasons. So we're looking forward to coming back sometime soon. And my name is Charles Gardner. I'm the principal of a small company called the Catalyst Group, and we do facilitation, community engagement, communications around water, natural resources, and infrastructure. What inspires me about the San Francisco, I'm never going to be able to pronounce that, the JPA, is really interesting combination of organizations to address things on an integrated, comprehensive way. We need more of that in lots of our natural resource and infrastructure management. My skills are particularly listening, so I'm going to do a lot of that today, and synthesizing information. So that's what I'm trying to help you all do, is synthesize and organize where you're trying to head. So anybody want to volunteer to go next? Ruben, you want to go next? I'll volunteer you.
Let's
You're on
unmute
mute.
you, Ruben.
I was saying, I'll wait since I already said something.
Okay. You wanna
I'll volunteer.
Okay, go ahead, Margaret.
All right, my show and tell. Let's see if you can see that. So my, oh, come on, closer, farther away, closer. I don't know if anybody can see that. It's a Starry Night mosaic that graces the end cap of my kitchen counter. I have taken up slicing my fingers to ribbons with brightly colored pieces of glass in my part-time, and I love doing mosaic art. So that's not what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to quit my day job anytime soon, but I love doing it. I have
That's
lots
great.
of pieces of glass to play with. What inspires me about the San Francisco Creek JPA, my background is pretty, I'm going to answer the two questions in one. My career background gives me a pretty diverse portfolio of skills and experience that, combined with my personal passion about sort of protecting things, whether it's protecting the climate, people, the environment. The San Francisco Creek lets me protect people from flooding by creating a tangible outcome of our work, and in a community that I care about. I grew up in the area. As a kid, I would go out to the Palo Alto Baylands Science Center and look through the microscopes at critters in the bay water and mud, and was at one point thinking I would be a marine biologist. And my grandparents' home was just a stone's throw from the creek. So I have a fondness for the area and feel deeply committed to it. And that's what I bring to the party.
Great. Anyone else want to volunteer? Or I'll start calling on people.
I can go.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kevin Murray. I'm a staff member with the JPA. I'm going to show you a book I'm reading right now. It's called Run for Your Life. I'm an avid runner, not competitively, but just for fun, for my own kind of physical and mental well-being. I've been doing it for a long time. And this book is helping me understand how to continue to be a runner later in life, when the knees and back aren't as cooperative as they were when you were young.
Very good.
I've been with the JPA a long time, so there's a whole lot that inspires me about it. Mostly it's completing large-scale, long-term projects. And that's why I've really been committed throughout my career to this agency and this work. And I think among many kind of skills and perspectives, just my institutional history with the agency is what's most important, because I have a lot of experience and memories on how we got to where we are and how we can be successful moving forward.
Thanks, Kevin.
Good to see you all.
Okay. Any other volunteers? Supervisor Pine, you're not unmuted. Do you want to go?
Oh, sure. My name's Dave Pine, and I serve on the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. My formal connection to the JPA is that I'm the chair of the new San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise District, which very excited to have up and running to address flooding and sea level rise issues around the entire San Mateo County. And I've been fortunate to have been involved with the Creek JPA for about 8 years now. So I've always enjoyed serving on the Creek JPA because it really gives me a kind of a hands-on feeling for what it takes to do projects to deal with sea level rise and flooding. In terms of show and tell, I have a lot of pictures of my two kids here, and my oldest son Kevin reminds me of a story I don't know, early on in my service on the JPA, decided to take a field trip down to the creek and go check things out. So I brought my son Kevin and a friend of his. And man, they were really young at the time and they got super muddy around the creek edge. And we went to that, we were in East Palo Alto. I think it was the Togo's sandwich shop, and I couldn't find them. I didn't know where they went. And it turns out they were in the bathroom trying to clean all this mud off. And that bathroom looked like a bomb went off. I'll tell you, it was something else. There was mud everywhere. It took us a long time to clean it up. So that's just a little side story about my son's experience with the creek.
That's great.
I've been inspired by the creek because, you know, it's the border between the two counties, and the fact that it was never, you know, culverted. It's just an incredible, beautiful natural resource. And it has so many facets and features to it. And I've always been inspired by the JPA as an organization, because it's always been so, you know, can-do and agile and productive. You know, I always look at it as kind of like a startup government. It's just a few people to get a whole bunch done. So in terms of what I bring, you know, I'm very active in issues of sea level rise around the Bay, and of course in San Mateo County. So I think I, you know, bring the, you know, a broad perspective on these issues that hopefully is helpful here with respect to the creek.
Great. Thank you. Pat, you're unmuted. Do you want to?
Not that I want to, but I will.
Okay, I'm forcing you.
Yeah. So first, I'm not going to show you what's visible in our living room, because it is a massive pile of boxes right now. My mother-in-law passed away 3 months ago at 102 and a half.
Oh, wow.
As what we think she was the oldest living British female officer from World War II. So Captain Bemis. And so we've had the pleasure of inheriting a lot of treasures and records and photos, and now we have to figure out how we're going to contend with all of it. Which also kind of brings me back, and Margaret was talking about kind of family heritage around here. My mother actually, during her teen years, her parents rented here in Palo Alto. Her dad was an Army officer, and so during the war they lived here. And she just always, out of all the places she lived, and she moved and lived a lot of places, this was probably her favorite. And that kind of instilled in me an appreciation of the community. We actually ended up buying the house that my grandparents had twice rented, and remodeled it. And so our kids are fourth generation here. As far as what inspires me about the Creek JPA, first, I really, you know, I had the pleasure of serving on this board for 7 years previously, and it's a lot of crossover in board members. And I just have to say it's a board that I enjoy serving with, the individuals and the staff, probably as much or more than any of the boards I'm on. It's just a real good group. And as far as the purpose itself, I really also value that this is an organization that really has done an effective job of helping bridge the relationships of our counties and Palo Alto and East Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And that's something that I believe in and have really valued about this organization. And then on a more personal pleasure level, I have to decide this afternoon whether I will hike at Los Trancos Creek or Windy Hill and Corte Madera Creek. And I grew up, you know, just treasuring our natural habitat in this region, and our watershed is just one of the really special places, so adjacent to urban development that it's a real treasure. As far as perspective and skills, I think some of it is the perspective is that about this as being an opportunity to work collectively as a community. I think I'm a strong problem solver, and I'm willing to kind of challenge assumptions. And then I bring a background from business, government, and environment, and so those are kind of the perspectives that I hope to contribute.
Great, thanks. Mayor Combs?
Sure, thanks. Happy to go next. My name is Drew Combs, and I represent Menlo Park as a member of the City Council to the JPA. And so my show and tell will, hopefully, if I can switch it, is my son who's sitting right here this morning with me, and he turns 1 tomorrow, and so 100% a pandemic kid knows nothing but the world in pandemic, but hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, and he'll actually be able to have a regular second birthday party in a year from now. So what inspires me about the Creek, I think I've been on the JPA for a couple of years now, since I joined the council. But of the board members, think I'm sort of the least tenured or the shortest tenured. And so I think what inspires me is the years and the dedication and effort of everyone on the board, and also the staff to this effort and to the mission of the JPA. And so that certainly is inspires me and really sort of commits me to adding value to what's attempting to be accomplished there. What special perspective or skill? I don't know if I would say it's special, but certainly as on council, I bring my educational background in law and professional background as a journalist into these discussion and issues. I do specifically as it relates to the JPA live about a block or so from the Creek, and so I interact with it every day. This morning went running along Woodland, and so in that sense I certainly bring that perspective for someone for whom the Creek really is like this omnipresent part of my life and my family's life. And so happy to be here today.
Great, thank you. Director Kremen?
Oh shoot! I was thinking you would forget about me.
No, you're on screen there, so I'm not going to forget about you.
Oh, it's so sad. As you know, Gary Kremen from Valley Water. You know, a project like this is kind of part of our core mission of safe, clean drinking water and creek ecosystem restoration and flood control. Kind of what inspires me here. This is a really complicated problem to fix. You know, people think, oh, it's so simple to solve things in government, but look at how challenging this, you know, even getting downstream done was, you know, 2 counties, 2 cities, county government, special district. You know, as an engineer, I love complicated problems. But this one is really challenging. So what inspires me, and by the way, I don't know if I can share something personal from my home, because as you can see, I'm driving through lovely San Mateo. I don't know if that's me. I'm in the car on the way to a May Day event, but you know, kind of fixing getting a project done that we promised the voters. I mean, it feels good to hopefully fulfill a promise. So I'm looking forward today, and I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Um,
All right, Charles, I'll finish off our board.
okay, great.
So, yeah, so my name is Ruben Abrica, and I represent East Palo Alto. You know, I couldn't get my hands on a little picture I have of my mom and me, and I was about 3 years old at the time. And we were born up in the mountains in Mexico, central Mexico. And interestingly enough for me, now I've lived close to the creek within a block, like Drew says. And so it's been a presence in my life the last, well, I've been in East Palo Alto 42 years, but 32 of them, including this morning, to get up, and the creek is right, you know, very close. And it seems like a little creek compared to the big rivers up in the mountains in Mexico, but we know it's a wild, beautiful creek. And I've seen it so many times when it's been so close to flooding, including a couple of times when it actually flooded our community. I think, like all of the board members have said in different ways, I've been inspired by the collaborative work of the various communities. You know, East Palo Alto, we're at the, we've been sort of a potential little Katrina, and luckily it never really happened that way. And it's been the result of the work of all the different agencies, because in some ways we're, you know, the most disadvantaged community, like many others. And so working together has made it possible for us to have protection and, you know, to keep working on that. At times it's been hard and difficult, but we've hung together. And so I definitely appreciate that. I think one of the little contributions that I won't take, you know, credit personally, but our community from the very beginning of the formation of the JPA, and even later on, even more, and I certainly have always been an advocate that we could get flooded by the tide, just by the high tide. And so the whole Safer Bay project, I think in some ways, East Palo Alto had, our voices were really strong. And I think the JPA heard that and embraced it fully, which now, of course, it's you know, part of the San Mateo County project, which is very important too. And so, yeah, with that, I just want to, you know, appreciate all the people who've been on the board at different stages, including our current board. And I look forward to, you know, continue to bring protection to all the communities. And I don't have any particular technical skills, whatever, other than having served in local government for many years and being close to the creek and sort of keeping an eye on it visually, but also with all the work that we do. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Tess, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tess Speiler, and I've been working for the JPA for the past 5 years. Something that's important to me, it's my 3 kids and my husband, my kids at 18 months and 18 years in the pictures back there. And my husband is actually in Brady, Texas, trying to help his parents move out of the big family home into a small place. And I'm headed after this to my grandson's 3rd birthday in Sacramento. So those are the things that are important to me. What inspires me about the JPA is that I've spent most of my career working on big projects throughout the United States, and I love being local. I love learning about our watershed. When I started the JPA, I thought I was in the San Francisco Creek watershed. I'm not. I'm in the Adobe Creek watershed. So it's that part of it, learning about all my neighbors and getting to live and work. I mean, to work in Menlo Park was just wonderful. Now we're back in Palo Alto by the Baylands by our Creek project, and that's equally wonderful. So I guess the part so besides being local, the second thing is I just love being part of the little blue engine that could. You know, we're 4 people and we built this humongous project that took coordination from everybody. And Director Kremen is right, it almost didn't get built. So the special skills that I have, I would say technical skills, management skills, and a bit of construction experience before coming to the JPA. And I think that was the distinguishing factor that got me hired in the first place. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Tess. Miko?
I'm Miko. I don't have anything to show personally because I'm in the office and don't have many personal things here. But what is important to me is my family and my community. What inspired me about the JPA is the community aspect. When I applied for this job, I love the fact that this was a joint powers authority that was uniting the communities around the creek. I have lived in the watershed in Belhaven community all my life. I've raised my sons here. And I believe that in association with the fact that I have been with the JPA for so long gives me an opportunity to provide a different type of insight. I'm not a project manager. I'm not the face of any of these organizations, but I'm a person who has grown up in this watershed. I have lived and worked in each of the 3 cities, and I have seen the many different changes within the watershed. So I'm able to give a different type of insight that I don't think we necessarily hear all the time.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks, Miko. Okay, I'd like to get everybody else quickly introducing themselves, but I'm gonna kind of ask for sort of lightning round introductions. So, Brad, were you raising your hand there and volunteering? Great.
Yeah. I'm Brad Eggleston. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Palo Alto. So that's my involvement with the JPA. I just reached for a book I'm reading right now about avoiding the climate disaster, which is something else I care deeply about. And I'm very involved in that work on the Climate Action Plan for Palo Alto, which also definitely intersects with the JPA's work and mission as we look at sea level rise. And the JPA, a great group of people from the JPA staff, as well as all the agencies that partner together. And it's rare in my experience to have the opportunity to work closely on complicated projects with people from a variety of agencies with their own contributions and expertise and perspectives. For me personally, in terms of skills and experience, project management, delivering projects. As Public Works Director in Palo Alto, I really like completing projects and delivering things to the community. Just last night at 1 a.m, I was out at Highway 101 where we placed the 2nd truss of our new Adobe Creek bicycle pedestrian overcrossing. So we'll be completing that one in the near future and looking forward to eventually reaching the same place with the Newell Road Bridge, part of the upstream project that Palo Alto leads. So thanks.
All right, well, thanks for getting up early if you were up at 1 working. So have a sip of coffee.
Hey, Charles.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. We'll complete the Palo Alto contingent here. I'm Ed Chicada, Palo Alto City Manager. Do the lightning round here. I'll share that my show and tell here will be the photo behind me on the wall here. Actually, it's not a photo, it's a painting from the San Jose Grand Prix. Little project among projects, if you may recall, back in 2005 to 2007, I believe it was, a project I ran for the city of San Jose. So just cool. Perhaps an example in and of its own way, a road race through streets of downtown San Jose, that sometimes big projects can be a lot of fun and also a lot of work. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Any other volunteers? Alec, you were on early. You want to?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm in the car. I'm running late back to home from oil change appointment I had this morning. My name is Alec Nicholas. I'm the capital engineering manager overseeing the San Francisco Creek flood protection project design from Valley Water's side. Previously, I was the project manager for the flood protection project at Valley Water. My background is in structural engineering, construction management, specifically in the design of bridges, retaining walls, and other transportation related infrastructure. I really do like the San Francisco Creek project, mostly because it has a lot of challenges. And with my engineering background, trying to figure out the best solution for all the different constraints that we have, it's stressful at times, but it's also rewarding at the end. I don't really have much of a show and tell item, unfortunately, in the car, but if I could, I'd probably show you all the Home Depot bags that I have around the house as I'm trying to fix it up.
That's good. Great. Thanks, Alec. Okay. Kamal,
Yeah. Kamal, yes,
Kamal,
Charles,
sorry.
thank you. My name is Kamal Fallaha. I'm the Public Works Director in East Palo Alto. I've been with the city for 14 years, and I'll tell you, every minute is enjoyable and challenging in the city of East Palo Alto. For show and tell, I'm happy grandpa this morning. I picked up my 2-month-old baby with my son and his wife, who arrived at SFO last night at midnight. So I'm excited to see her for the first time. I have another granddaughter who was born with the corona. We call her Lina Corona. Her name is Lina, and her nickname is Corona. So because she hasn't seen anything except 1 year of misery. She didn't even go to a park until like last week. So I'm excited, things improving. What I love about working in the city of East Palo Alto for this long, and I think the last time I was told I'm the longest public works director in the history of the city since 1983, when the city was incorporated from San Mateo County. So I'm excited. We turn challenges to opportunities, whether it's a bridge overcrossing we did within 4 years, planning, design, and construction. We won so many awards the last 2 years from so many agencies. So I'm excited. We turned Cooley Landing. It's a wonderful, if you are not familiar with Cooley Landing, please take the trail and go all the way to Cooley Landing. And remember that used to be a county dumping ground that we turned it, we cleaned it, we removed the hazard, we turned it to education center and a beautiful, just a jewel of a park. Right. So that's our director, Ruben Abrica, has been involved, and Lisa and all the team that you see on the council, because she's crying now. I'm gonna move away from, okay. That's my granddaughter, yeah. So I appreciate, all the hard work of the JPA. What I love about working with the JPA is collaboration with all these agencies to turn challenges to opportunities. I slept this winter very well because of their work. Otherwise, during the rainy season, we had to keep an eye on the, advanced warning system, the cameras, and then we spent, sleepless night in the city just watching the creek. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Okay, Trisha.
Hi, I'm Trisha Ortiz. I'm the general counsel to the Creek Authority. And if I were to have a show and tell item, it would probably be a pair of running shoes or a pair of biking shoes, which leads me to what inspires me about the JPA. I live in San Mateo, so I spend a lot of time either biking or running through the community that I'm working with. My kids play soccer. They've probably played soccer in every city up and down the peninsula. So I spend a lot of time here, and the special skills that I bring is, as legal counsel, my job is to provide advice to assist the board with achieving its goals.
Excellent. Starla.
Thank you. I'm Starla Robinson. I'm the city manager for Menlo Park. So I spend a lot of time on Zoom and in meetings, but when I'm not, I like to garden. And so these are roses from my garden.
Nice.
Thank you. I also live just a couple of blocks from the creek. And so my commitment to the Creek JPA is really somewhat personal, but also professional. I think the special skill that I bring is that once I've got clear policy direction, then I can take a project to completion. And what I love about the Creek JPA is the collaboration between our different communities.
Great. Len, are you on?
Yes, hi.
Great, thanks.
So my name is Len Matterman, and I run the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resilience District. I was with the JPA, running the JPA from 2008 until early 2020. And so what inspires me about the JPA, I guess I'll combine the two last points, like I think Margaret did. I have degrees in biology and political science, and the JPA is really a good blend of politics, policy, and biology and engineering. And I've really enjoyed kind of the challenges of melding those things, especially on the political side. In terms of what's important to me, my kids and my wife are not around, which is why I'm in the kind of living area of the house. But I do have our friend around.
Oh, excellent.
So anyway, Annie is joining us for the meeting this morning. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Len. Okay, Lisa.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Gautier. I am the alternate to the JPA from the city of East Palo Alto. I'm a longtime resident of East Palo Alto. My family moved here in 1967. So I truly understand this city and how it is. I live in the Gardens area. So it's so important. The work that has been done on the JPA impacts me and my family. In 1998, we lived here. And in 2012, when we had our flood, I was a newly elected council member. And I just remember going out to the store to find some rain boots so that I could, because I knew it just felt different that year, and standing out on the creek and watching that creek rise and just wanting to be here for the residents. So what the San Francisco Creek JPA is doing for our community is so important. And I'm just excited about what the Flood Resilient District and the Creek JPA will do to make sure that we're all protected. What skills do I bring? I think the collaboration, I mean, I love, or what things that are important, the collaboration as well. I was so impressed to see all the entities come together to solve a regional problem that will impact us all, and grateful to see the end product of the Reach 1, and looking forward to the work Reach 2 and Reach 3 when that is done, and what it's going to do for our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, did I miss anybody? I think I've got everybody. Okay, excellent. That was great. I mean, that was really, I hope it was as valuable to all of you as it was to me. It was great to hear from all of you. Some really good common themes there that I think set us up well for the discussion for the rest of the morning. So do you want to go to the next slide, Margaret? So here's what we're going to do next. So we're going to do Margaret's going to give a quick overview of the work plan, and then we want to talk about the goals there, goals and priorities. So she's going to give a high-level view of projects and programs, organizational issues, and then the discussion we want to come back to is what do you see as the important priorities and goals for the JPA? And you know, the setup that she does is really to tee up that conversation. And then another way to think about it is how can the JPA contribute to and support your local goals, since you all represent a local organization. So what can the JPA do to support what you're trying to accomplish in your jurisdictions? So those are the questions we want to come back to. Margaret, I think you're going to step into a different view here to give an overview of the work plan. So let's see if we can make that happen smoothly.
Yep. I will find that document and So let me know if you all can see
Yes,
that.
that's great.
Okay, so let me scroll up to the beginning of this document. So this is a version that has been updated from the previous 3-year rolling work plan based on the board's input that we should align the work plan to the fiscal year instead of the calendar year. It's the same set of action items year by year that we presented with some updates for this year and coming years, just based on the past 3 or 4 months of experience, thinking about, you know, the emerging, evolving course of activities in our various projects. So I'm going to go through this on a very high level. When I get to the end, it's our opportunity for conversation, and don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask questions if there's something I roll through that you'd like to know more about. So as you know, we're working on REACH 2 and very especially to confirm full funding for the REACH 2 project. Detention as needed in the upper reaches, and for Safer Bay, I've grouped this in the heading for like funding and financing, all of those things all together. It's just easier to put them in one bucket at the moment for conversation. Because ubiquitously, we are looking for and applying for grants and other potential funding sources for all of those projects all of the time. So for REACH 2 work, there are some critical steps and milestones, including identifying the locations for property easements and access for REACH 2 work that includes the channel widening. There are some details about that and the prioritization for those actions that are going to depend upon the outcome of some hydraulic analysis that is underway right now. So we are working avidly with our engineering and consulting partners to put together the full package of material that's necessary for our regulatory agency permit applications. And as you know, we are working with the Army Corps of Engineers on the CAP 205 support for the channel widening work. We continue to be engaged productively with Stanford University, and we are looking forward to collaborating with the city of Palo Alto on the combining our environmental permit work for Newell Bridge with the remainder of the Creek work for streamlining and efficiency's sake. And importantly, I'd like to create a community engagement plan for outreach to the community, outreach to media, outreach to regulatory agencies, specific to the REACH 2 project, but as a template for also our work on Safer Bay and our eventual hypothetical work in REACH 3. Moving on to the flood early warning system, we have completed the critical software update, and we are in progress coordinating with and communicating with our critical partners in the emergency operations groups and our member communities for a memorandum of understanding for transitioning the alerts, the emergency alert system, to the existing countywide zone haven style communication systems that are far more sophisticated than the communications and alert system that we have built into our system now. We want to ensure that that transition is seamless and effective, and that all parties are coordinating, but we are on track to complete that this year. Ongoing for REACH 1 is the approval of the operations and maintenance manual, which was actually submitted just yesterday. We have mitigation maintenance that is an ongoing obligation, monitoring reporting as well. We plan to install the interpretive panels before the end of this year, and we have obligations for continued permit compliance, including updating an Eco Atlas. For REACH 3, we are completing the initial evaluation. We are in regular and productive coordination and communication with Stanford University. The evaluation of the feasibility for upstream detention is in progress, and we hope to have some clearer and more perhaps definitive evaluation of how feasible that detention is in the not too distant future. It is of course a complicated location with many complicating factors. So we will look forward to some more detailed analyses about all of those factors in the future. For Safer Bay, what we are planning to submit the notice of preparation for our EIR later this quarter. We'll complete a phase 1 geotechnical investigation, complete a BRIT permitting response and continued coordination. Again, create a community engagement plan. This is also going to be necessary as at least one of our pending grant applications is very focused on community outreach and engagement with our partners. Let's see, I'd like to continue engaging and deepen the engagement with MTC and Caltrans to make sure that they are aware of our progress and we of theirs. And continued engagement with our partners in community organizations such as the Ravenswood Business Association, Climate Resilient Communities, Nuestra Casa, and others. Because there are a number of commercial developments that are interested in our Safer Bay project, as well as other landowners and commercial property owners, continued coordination with their development plans is also very important to make sure that we don't inadvertently get in each other's way. So we are also coordinating with utilities, with corporations like Facebook, and I should have included PG&E here. We are updating our MOUs for continued partnerships, as I like to call it, keeping the band together for the FEMA HMGP grant, the FEMA HMGP grant in East Palo Alto and the BRIC grant that was submitted for the Menlo Park area. Now, transitioning to the inside the house side, the operations and finance, we are bringing audits up to date, though that is on track. We are thinking of, in the next fiscal year, bringing a look ahead budget for future years. And we are in the midst of transitioning to a new banking service to provide us better customer service. And on the administrations and organization side, a goal of reconciling, updating, and ratifying the JPA members agreement, which is a very important component of today's agenda. Continuing the business continuity planning and operationalizing within the JPA organization itself. That just means making sure we have redundant IT systems, up-to-date security, sort of normal practices and processes that ensure that there isn't a loss of data or there isn't a loss of functionality if one of us should be absent or there's some other kind of problem. We'd like to create an SFCJPA board handbook to ensure that when new board members come along, they benefit from the experience and knowledge of staff and the board that have come before them. To facilitate decision-making and documentation, implementing a DocuSign or Adobe for board and staff signatures, a volunteer program, digitizing our historic hard copy documents, and preparing for the CSDA Transparency Certificate of Excellence, because that will help us ingrain and maintain some organizational systems that will keep us operating smoothly and more transparently into the future. And that's the high-level view of the most immediate set of plans for this year. I want to pause and make sure we have a chance to have folks ask questions that any of us on staff can answer.
Any just clarifying questions about any of that Margaret went through? Okay, I want to can go back to the slide set, Margaret, that'd be
Yep.
great.
Yep.
So what we want to discuss here is to hear from you about sort of what does this tell you about the priorities and goals in the near or midterm. Go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So so we want to hear from you about priorities and goals. What do you see as the top level there? And then again, you know, how can the JPA in doing this work plan contribute to things that you might have going on locally? So we want to talk about that. At the end of this kind of round robin of conversation, we will kind of open up for public comment. We've got a few public members that may want to offer some comments. So we'll do that at the end of this discussion. I'm going to switch screens as we go into this. We're going to track and record your comments. I'm going to get some help from Kevin and Tess to do that. So give me
Do you want me to stop my share?
I think that'll just make you stop there.
There we go.
Okay. So so this is essentially a whiteboard where we're going to record your comments and as we go. So so we have some documentation and can sort and organize those with staff going forward. So again, so important goals, priorities that you see going forward, and again the contribution that the JPA makes to your local programs. So any of the board members want to start with thoughts about high-level goals? Dave, you're unmuted. Does that indicate that you're ready to go to offer a?
I'm going to hold back off now, I think.
Okay. Ruben, do you want to start with some high-level goals or priorities?
Yeah, I'll start with a couple. I think, again, I think using the comprehensive, you know, 3-year rolling plan as a framework, I'm looking at it that way. And then one example in the section on upstream, in the list of things there, I see that I think for 21, 22, it's already going on, but definitely for 21, 22, I think developing a funding plan with a certain strategy, sort of high level strategy, a formula. I don't know, you know, what to call it, but exactly. But I think that is, as we did some years ago for the first phase, I think that to me it's a priority to fully develop that, have the board vetted, have, you know, figure out a way how we can start doing that. I think the whole permitting process, it's I think we've gone through it once, but hopefully it won't be as difficult this time. But, you know, that's always a challenge, I think, which involves the board in many ways also. And yeah, I'll just start with those two. They're examples, you know, I think of each section may have certain that kind of stand out. For those two stand out for me as a key.
Excellent.
You know, this is Gary. I'd actually like to agree. I mean, the big thing is we got to come up with the big picture, how we're going to split the cost here. I think that's number one. Number two. Number two is definition at the earliest possible moment of what's the project. You know, will it include detention or not? I think a lot of the rest of the stuff sometimes goes in the tactical stuff. Like, you know, a lot of the administrative, we don't need to know that. We trust our executive director on it. So those are the big things for me.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Pat, do you have thoughts about priorities and goals here?
Well, certainly the Reach 2 funding is at the top of the list and probably most immediate. One of the things that within that discussion is that I don't know that we have the answer to, but a critical part is what portion of that do we expect we're going to be able to fill through grants versus what needs to come from member agencies or even a assessment district or other sources. And that's, I think, one of the dilemmas we're in is that we're in the midst of a number of grants, but we only have a sense of the likelihood. That really puts a monkey wrench into being able to understand the balance of the equation. I also, longer term, want to be looking at two areas. One is I've been off the board for 4 years, and so I apologize for not being as up to speed on this one as other members. But the whole on the Safer Bay element is the disconnect between north of the creek and south of the creek, and how those the bay sea level rise issues are being addressed by this agency versus other agencies. And then the last thing is something I brought up at the tail end of the last board meeting, which is, I think, an increasing awareness that all of our assumptions about the highest level risk from a severe weather event have been based upon the protections we have from our existing watershed, and how that could all fall apart because of a major fire in the watershed that is seeming increasingly possible, if not likely.
Great. Supervisor Pine, do you have thoughts about goals or priorities?
Echo the sentiments about putting a top priority on working through the funding for Reach 2. Currently, as has been mentioned, there are a lot of grants that are outstanding, but it looks like under any scenario, there's going to be a very significant gap to close. And really finding an answer to that is going to be hard work. So that's always been my number one. That's my number one issue.
Okay, great. Fortunately, it's on the agenda coming up, so we'll talk a little bit more about that one. Mayor Combs, any thoughts about priorities and goals?
Yeah, I think, again, sort of echoing what's been said a few other times, certainly financing with regards to the upstream project and how that looks. Obviously, all of our agencies have been obviously dramatically impacted by the pandemic. And our budgets, right, and our revenue has. And so I think we'll be looking at that. I think that funding exercise differently than we could have imagined looking at it just, a year and a half ago. So I think it's paramount. With regards to, I think certainly, I think we need to be very clear when it comes to like the detention project. What are like sort of the timelines we're looking at for like really taking an assessment of like what's happening there, and what's what's the likelihood of success, and has the major stakeholder with regards to that project, Stanford, changed its thinking on it. I think that it's going to be key that it's not just something that so we sort of go through the motions, but that we really do have these important check-ins to take an assessment of where that project is, and what's the likelihood of some sort of success, and what does the absence of that success look like with regards to providing protection.
Great. Thanks. Very good. Let me loop back through the group to this question about kind of the other way around of the contribution that JPA can make to your local conditions. Any thoughts about that? It is kind of turning around your thinking of sort of yeah. So what does the JPA offer? What are some priority areas the JPA could offer to your local conditions? Was pondering that. Anybody have some thoughts on it?
Yeah, Charles, I think I'll follow the comment that Gary made in terms of defining, reach to. Obviously, the whole upstream and detention, we need to look at everything, but for us in East Palo Alto, Reach 1 already sort of definitely helped a lot, took care pretty much of the east side of East Palo Alto, but I always like to remind people that in East Palo Alto, we have a west side of East Palo Alto, because it's not the freeway that divides the county. And so, in fact, the west side is the most densely populated area with it, and the flooding was very bad back in 89. I think it is. I forget now, or 98 rather. I forget. But so we're part of the Reach 2, along with obviously Menlo Park and Palo Alto. And so I think having a real clear understanding of what is Reach 2 entail, and so we sort of sketched it out, but because that is the next step, I think, in offering at least a protection up to the storm of record, like they like to say, which may not necessarily be 100-year protection, but it's a pretty high level protection. So that's one area that I think is important to really drill down into, it as well, trying to integrate the upstream. But anyway, I'll leave it at that for now.
So articulating more clearly the benefits of a Reach 2 project for all three communities. Yeah, right. Great. Other thoughts about kind of what the JPA contributes to your local jurisdictions?
Well, I'll just echo Ruben's comments that Reach 2 is really critical. Reach 1 was a really essential initial phase to protect big portions of East Palo Alto principally, although some of Palo Alto's less developed areas benefited as well. But Reach 2 is what really addresses for our community, the primary flood risks. One of the things that I don't think we've really analyzed well enough and communicated well enough to our communities is the degree to which Reach 1, including all the way to the improvements to West Bay Shore and under the Bay Shore, have reduced the flood level or risk of flooding and the degree of flooding in Reach 2 already. Okay. And we kind of have treated it as if we don't get any benefit in Reach 2 until we do the Reach 2 project. And I don't think most of our communities realize that Reach 1 has already had a significant favorable impact on those risks. There will be, with a moderate flood, fewer parcels will get flooded, and those that get flooded will get flooded to a lesser degree. And I don't think our communities understand that.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Other thoughts about the local benefits?
Speaking for the new San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise District, you know, our goal in the decades ahead is to have a resilient shoreline across the entire bayshore. So certainly there going to be tremendous collaboration between the Flood and Sea Level Rise District and the Creek JPA. So as the Flood and Sea Level Rise District, you know, begins to develop plans, say like in Redwood City, the integration with the SAFER project will be very important.
Right.
Yeah, and I would add the same for the Santa Clara side. We're responsible for that. So the answer, sure.
Okay. So it sounds like that's on both sides. It's an area for further communication, coordination as to responsibilities, and I mean that I assume is what the result of the collaboration is figuring out who's doing what, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Want to open it up to staff members. Other thoughts about kind of priorities and goals, or you know, key coordination issues to be addressed that kind of flow from the work plan. Anybody have thoughts there? Don't all speak at once. Or you're all on mute, so you need to unmute. Try to say something. So just any thoughts about the priorities or goals, or how the JPA contributes to things you're trying to do locally?
Well, I'll
Yeah, go ahead, Starla. Thanks.
So I think I think these would be our priorities as well, but I think the funding is a critical issue. And I'm sure we're all facing pandemic funding issues, but especially for Reach 2, I think Menlo Park really needs to have a better understanding of what our obligatory funding will be, because right now it looks like more than we can afford.
Mm-hmm. Great. Other thoughts? Going once? Going twice?
Well, I'll just say I'm following up on my comment earlier about the role of the grants. I don't know if Margaret can kind of offer a sense of what portion of the budget shortfall for Reach 2 we think we have a good chance of meeting through the grants. That's something that I'm interested in. I appreciate that that's got to be have caveats with it, because we're far from having any certainty on that, but it still kind of flavors the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, I was just gonna say,
if I may jump in, Charles?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is such an important issue, and staff have been working on both grant acquisition as well as project design modifications, utilizing some opportunities to maybe, if you want to call it, reprioritize certain elements of the Reach 2 project so that we can optimize the performance of the project while reducing costs. As I'm sure you're all aware, these projects are really complicated and everything is hitched to everything else. But we are, and I'll show in a few slides and after we're done with this exercise, a document broken into 3 parts that we have been calling the funding gap table, that shows the current project cost estimates, the current known funding opportunities, the grants that have been identified and how likely they are, and then a quick discussion of the potential funding gap, most optimistic to least optimistic. So we will talk about that and hopefully have some very encouraging news to share.
Great. Okay, anybody else from the staff? Ed, yeah.
Sure. Well, perhaps just echoing particular Starla's comments as well as Pat's. Recognize it's a bit of a chicken and the egg challenge when it comes to grants. Perhaps with respect to the JPA and our individual agencies, if we can stay in sync with our legislative advocacy, with congressional representatives and the like, then that I think will help just keep us all on the same page as we're doing what we can to bring as much certainty as quickly as we can.
Great.
Yeah, I'd like to add, you know, it's going to be great to have if we can get grants or others, but I think we need to go from assuming full grants to we're getting nothing, and the Valley Water money being what it is and how everyone else is going to step up.
Yeah, great. Other thoughts? I thought I saw someone else who was about to speak up. Okay. Yeah, this is clearly one of the key issues, and fortunately we've got some time coming up on the agenda to kind of go to the next level and as Margaret said, share some information and kind of deepen the conversation about how do we address this. There's nothing else from this group. I want to take a moment and hear from the public. Let me sorry, one second. Need to see my participants list. Yeah, so we have a couple of members of the public. Raise your hand. Yeah, so Jerry Hearn raised your hand. So yeah, if you could provide us some comments.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Great.
thanks.
Jerry Hearn, I've been an observer and a public participant with the JPA since its inception, and appreciate all the work that's been done, and the staff has been fabulous. I'll get to that in a minute. The priorities for me, obviously the very first one is to complete the Reach 2 project. And that means both complete and get the permitting done and the construction and the funding. That seems to me pretty obvious. That's the highest priority. The second is to move forward as much as we can with finding out whether any upstream detention on Stanford lands is actually feasible, and including securing funding to make sure that we get through that process. I am not totally optimistic about that, as I have said over and over again. We are going to be meeting with the Searsville Advisory Group is going to be reconvening, so we'll find out what opportunities there are now that more studies have been done on Searsville for detention at the dam. And that's going to happen one way or the other, but the other ones I'm not sure about. So I think we need to start looking at other options to reach the goals that we have around that. Then on the base side, I'm in total agreement with what a number of people have said, including Dave Pine, that there really needs to be total coordination about how we're going to deal with sea level rise, both with the flooding and sea level rise district and with Valley Water and Palo Alto on the north and the south of the JPA area. So, and I think everybody understands that now, and everybody's working in that direction, and which is a huge change from the past. And I really appreciate the work the JPA has done to actually make a lot of that happen. The one other thing I want to bring up is, and this is always something I think about, is the JPA has a very, very small staff. 4 people, like I think Tess, you called it I think it was the little red engine that could, right?
Little blue engine that could, yeah.
I remember which one it is. That's a long time ago since the kids were around. And I just want to continually make sure that we have enough people working enough people to carry out all the tasks that need to be done as we see this huge list of things to be done. I don't want to stretch an organization too thin. So that's something else I think we always ought to keep in mind, is that we have fabulous staff, but they are limited in the amount of time that they have to dedicate to our efforts. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other public comments at this point? We'll have some other opportunities to break for comments too. So, okay, not seeing any. Just I want to loop back to the board members. Any final thoughts before we move on to the next topic? Okay. Excellent. Margaret's ahead of me. Good. Grabbing back up the control. Great. So, our next topic kind of flows from this conversation of kind of high-level goals. We want to revisit the vision and mission and the member agreement, and spend a little bit of time talking about that. So, Margaret has put together some proposed revised language for the vision and mission. So we want to take a look at that, get your feedback about it. Again, we want to stay pretty high level. We're not going to try to wordsmith today, but we want to hear particularly from the board members, but also from staff as to is this headed in the right direction? Are there major issues that need to be addressed with it? So we'll have a little bit of discussion around that, identifying really the outstanding issues, and then staff can go back and work and polish. And then after the vision mission, then we want to talk a little bit about the member agreement. It's my understanding that work has been done previously on it. We really want to, the conversation we want to have there is really about what the process would be, what the board members expect the process to be to update the member agreement. So again, we're not trying to fix all these things today. We just want the high level ideas and direction. So Margaret, you've got, can you go back to the slides?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was there. Okay.
No, I'm looking at your file folders.
Oh dear. Okay. Sorry about that. I was looking for another document to have it queued up, but there we go. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so so if we go to the next slide, there we go. So so Margaret, you want to just tee up the thinking here about some of the revised language and then run a poll for this group as to kind of what your initial reactions are to this language. So Margaret, why don't you just tee it up a little bit?
So as I understand it, in the course of history, the board has at various times taken a look at the purpose statements within the members' agreement. But it's actually been since 2002 that the vision and mission statements for the organization have been kind of as they are since 2002. So the current vision statement that's on the left side of your screen is the most current one I could find. It harkens back to the founding ideas and thoughts at the time of the members in the community, basically when the JPA was formed. Time has progressed, our experience has progressed, our needs have evolved, and I have submitted for your consideration a very draft, for conversational purposes, revised vision statement for the organization. The next step in this will be the same for mission. There's a slide with the current mission and a revised, for discussion purposes, mission statement. Again, a vision is a high level, where do we see ourselves being in the fullness of time? Should all of our planets align, we will achieve this intended outcome. And the mission is, how do we see ourselves affecting that reality moving forward? So again, the 2002 vision and a proposed revised vision for the JPA. And this is again, not an opportunity or a time for specific wordsmithing just to get your sense of, are we headed in the right direction to recenter, refocus, and sort of reground our vision and mission that will help us as we move forward with updating the members agreement?
So what I'd like to do is start with kind of give you a moment to read this, but then start with just kind of a quick poll of everybody. And Nico, maybe you can just launch that poll. Just some feedback on, hey, this is great. No, this needs some work. No, it's completely off the mark. Is kind of the the level of response we're looking for. So take a moment to read it, and then if the poll is blocking your view, I think you'll be able to move the poll window around so you can
Yeah,
read
you can click on it, grab it, and slide it to one side or the other on your screen.
So if you could give us some quick feedback, that then helps us focus the conversation. And I hope those of you who are driving can pull over and respond. I think we had 2 people driving, which is not a good thing for conducting a poll. Okay, I see that only about half of the people have responded, so feel free to weigh in.
And for those of you who have not weighed in yet, and you would like to share your thoughts, you can do so as we go along in the Q&A section.
Yeah.
Or even those who have weighed in. If there are any more detailed comments or thoughts you'd like to share, staff would be happy to see those.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
All right. I see that it says the polling is closed. I don't know if that's just because it sets its own time limit, but if anybody listening in who has not had a chance to contribute to this poll and would like to do so informally after the retreat, we're happy to take your input.
So other than the poll, are we going to have a discussion on it or just?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this was just to kind of help us understand sort of where does the discussion need to go. And so I think of those who responded, this is pretty good. So I'm interested to hear from the folks who think it needs some revisions of the concepts. If those people could unmute and sort of weigh in as to what do they think the revisions need to be, so we can provide that input to the staff. So anybody who voted that way want to speak up and offer some suggestions?
This is Drew. Ruben, were you going to go, or who was?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, or was it? Is there some? Yeah, please go.
This is Gary. I'm willing to. I'm just a little, and I think I mentioned this before, worried about mission creep. From our perspective, this is to solve flooding and do the restoration associated with it. We have separate projects, and I think so does the county of San Mateo for sea level rise. Tidal flooding is kind of in the middle. So I want to be careful how we word it as helping versus taking over some other funded efforts.
So, Gary, any suggestions on can you elaborate a little bit further on sort of how you would distinguish between helping and can you just expand on some thoughts that might help the staff come up with some language?
Well, I would say, subject to what some of our constituent agencies are doing already
Uh-huh.
and have funding for.
Okay. Others have thoughts on that concept?
It's not fully formed, but so I'd
Yeah,
love to hear.
Yeah. No, that's
I
good.
do.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
So I concur, but I don't think that we can dive into the revision to the vision without the discussion about what we really think our role is on the sea level rise compared to the other agencies that are involved with it. So I think the vision needs to reflect that discussion and understanding.
Right. So hold that thought. We can talk about it a little bit in the mission, but it sounds like it might be a follow-on conversation from today, just to flesh that out a little bit more. Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, this is Drew. And so again, appreciating that, again, we're talking about the vision here, which is sort of expansive. And not sort of wordsmithing, but sort of when I see the word mitigate, right, I think of a legal document, and that shouldn't we, in a vision, right, be looking to words that are slightly maybe more inspirational, and looking at ourselves more as stewards, right, of this of the creek. Again, obviously mitigating flooding is very important and key, and obviously at the heart of why the JPA was created. And as I said, I live in the flood zone, but flooding is a natural, right? It is a natural thing that happens, and it is us who have moved here, and we don't like the consequences of flooding, which are dire. And so I do think that there should be some understanding of us in this organization as stewards, because obviously if it is solely about mitigating, it's very easy to mitigate, right? I mean, we can go all over the country and see how the Army Corps of Engineers has mitigated flooding risk, and that mitigation for lots of communities isn't pretty, and so again, at this vision, I know when it gets to other statements in the day-to-day, it is about sort of that mitigation. But in the vision, I would only say that maybe we should be try to be a little bit more aspirational.
Great.
Yeah, I have.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, I have sort of similar thoughts in that. Yeah, on the one hand, the founding statements, are old, but I mean, I think the current vision, it still has a little more of that, and maybe I always get, how would I say, the difference between the vision, and the mission, and then the goals. I usually veer towards the goals, like what are we going to do? But I agree with Drew. I think our vision should be more expansive, aspirational. And then once we get into the mission and the goals, where we can start parsing out, our responsibilities, etc. So I think maybe a case that right now we kind of touch on this, and as we move along with the goals and the newer realities, that we can sort of come back and finish up the wording of those.
Okay.
So well, there's a certain urgency because they're so old, but at the same time, I think it'd be best to make sure we're separating those things in a way.
So yeah, make sure we're clear on the mission and goals,
right,
before finalizing the vision. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Great. Dave, do you have thoughts?
I generally liked the revised mission. I thought the original one didn't put enough emphasis on protecting against flooding, which is, to my mind, kind of stands above as the number one objective. And the revised one, was good, I thought, in that it also picked up the idea of, of restoring and protecting the critical riparian and salt marsh habitats. So I thought it picked up some of that stewardship concept, in that clause. So I generally thought that the revised one was going in the right direction.
Great. Any other? Yeah.
Well, this is Gary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we need to think of, is this going to be in when I think of stewardship, we do that at Valley Water. That's a task that goes on forever. And at least our impression is there will be a day where this JPA shall end. And I think that needs to be part of the discussion. Unless we're going to be hiring field biologists and vegetation management folks, and we're going to have endowments. I think, another elephant in the room is, when will this JPA be done?
Interesting point. Any thoughts about that from other board members?
This is true. Well, I would say that I think stewardship can last as long as an organization lasts, and so it doesn't say adding the idea of stewardship doesn't mean that the JPA itself becomes everlasting, right? But as long as it is existing, that it should see itself as a steward. I do think, though, Gary, you bring up an important question to the extent of is there a sell-by date for the JPA, and that goes to some of the questions I had about, like, obviously when it comes to Reach 2 and that work, it is in progress, and it seems that the major challenge will be funding. But then when it comes to the other, and if we're setting aside the safer bay stuff, because obviously if it's clear that there is a sell-by date, then we're saying that the JPA's engagement in that is limited, right? Because that is going to be everlasting. And if the JPA is getting significantly involved in that, then we're committing the organization to going on for a long time. But for me, if we are saying that, like, it is finite, then it does get to a question about the detention project, like, right? And what are the key indicators there that we're going to look to which it can continue, or it is feasible, or it is not feasible, right? Because I can see a scenario where then that just becomes this little thing that keeps plugging away, and you make sort of incremental progress, but never really go on. I mean, if we look at sort of Searsville, like how long, and again, I know that is wrapped up in litigation, but it is something that could go on for a very long time. And so I do think it is key to, like, if we do say that, like, we do want to have, and I'm not saying this is where I'm leaning, but if we do want the JPA's life to be finite, and we really don't want it to at some point play a significant role in some of the sea level rise issue, then I think the key question is like, what are the things we're going to be looking for in that detention project to let us know that it is something that should continue, or it is something that is really beyond an agency of the JPA size, going back to, again, like I say, for a small agency. Like if we at some point are reaching a lot of pushback, then I do think it becomes the real question of, does the JPA have the wherewithal to withstand that?
That's great. I mean, I think this issue might be a good transition to the mission conversation. So I want to get to that pretty quickly, but let me just give an opportunity for any staff members want to weigh in, provide some thoughts, just from your experience in your organization. What makes a good vision? Does this capture the right direction? Any thoughts there?
Charles,
Yes.
I have one comment. This is
Yeah,
Len.
go ahead, Len. Yeah.
And it really it gets back to what Gary said in the first comment on the revised statement. I think the issue is for the creek work to differentiate from the sea level rise tidal flooding work is that on the creek work, I think the JPA already has shown that a particular agency needs to be the lead agency. On the downstream project, that was critical. Obviously, it was a partnership, substantial partnership with all the other agencies. Valley Water managed the construction of the key part of that, the levees and the flood walls. But on the creek work, the JPA is kind of the lead and mitigates. And now that's different from the sea level rise stuff, where it really needs to be a partnership with the cities and the new sea level rise district in San Mateo County on one side, and then Valley Water and Palo Alto on the other side. And so, maybe that's the distinction that was originally brought up by Gary and Pat, is differentiating between the role of the JPA on the creek and the role of the JPA as more of a partner on the tidal stuff. At least that's how it appears at the moment, the way things are moving in the direction on that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Len. That's a helpful suggestion. Other thoughts? Okay, why don't we move to the mission statement? Sorry, I'm juggling a lot of screens here. So, okay, Margaret, any setup for this?
Just the same as before. The current mission statement is going back to 2002, and this is my revision for the sake of conversation.
Okay, so take a moment to read that. And Miko, can you launch the next poll? Same poll, but on the subject of the mission, just to get your thoughts. Okay, we're having even fewer people weigh in on this one. This is your chance to be anonymous today. I think it's your only chance. Okay. All right, so let's we'll end that polling. I think everybody's weighed in who's going to. Here's your results. So this one gets a little bit better rating than the vision, but I think some of the conversation about the vision was really applying to the mission. Some of the suggestions about, particularly about the, what is the lifespan of the JPA, and maybe refining a little bit of its role. Might be some things to think about here in the mission. So any thoughts from the board members, particularly about the mission statement, or anything to expand on from the conversation we had underway?
I think it's just a follow-up on the prior discussion of whether we're providing relief from sea level rise, flooding, or doing something else in a more supportive role.
Yeah, okay. So I think, yeah, Margaret, that's clearly something to flesh out and maybe have a follow-up conversation about the role on the sea level rise piece and how to articulate that.
Yep.
Ruben, did you have something to add there, Ruben?
No, I agree. I think
Yeah,
I think that's where we are, you know, at this point.
Okay, great. Okay, no, that's excellent. Any final thoughts on this subject? Okay, I'm gonna keep moving forward here. Okay, so I mean, this is part of the conversation, but the members agreement is something that historically you folks have worked on, is updating that, but it hasn't got quite finished. So I think that the key question here really is, and Margaret, you can expand on this, but I think it's getting some direction to staff on the process for updating the member agreement and how that can be implemented smoothly and efficiently going forward. But Margaret, do you want to add any context here?
Sure, just really quickly. About a year ago this time, there was a process that went through the evaluation of the current or then current members agreement. There were a number of outstanding issues and things that needed to be brought up to date. And most especially the transition to the new San Mateo County Flooding and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District as the representative member. There were a few other changes and updates that were made, but there were a number of lingering and outstanding issues that were deferred for action to a later time. Some of those in particular have to do with these questions about the purpose of the agency. And there are a couple of other detailed sort of specifications, operating instructions, if you will, for the organization. And I'll share screen with you in a moment that will describe sort of what the issue is and the outstanding question. We'll go through that very briefly, high level. Again, this is not an opportunity or intended to be the opportunity to wordsmith and roll up our sleeves, but more to get a sense of there may be different approaches to addressing each of the outstanding issues. If the board and senior staff have recommendations about the best, most effective and efficient path to addressing the issues, closing the matter, and then ratifying a new agreement, that would be very appreciated, just so that staff at the JPA have an idea of what is the most effective path forward to closing those open items and moving forward with an updated agreement. So give me just a moment. I will find the document and share my screen. Okay. I hope everyone can see that. We have a Word document on the screen. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So just going through this at a very high level, there is an outstanding and unreconciled issue about self-insurance. There is the section on purposes that has a number of outstanding issues, including some clarifications about the things that the JPA does not itself perform. So for example, our current agreement says to facilitate and perform bank stabilization, etc. It would be important to clarify that the JPA's role is to facilitate those activities, but we do not ourselves perform bank stabilization, channel clearing, and other creek maintenance. There is a question that has come up a little bit in conversation today about the JPA's scope expanding to include the bay shoreline of its member entities And there's ambiguity about whether the term shoreline is encompassed within the term watershed. And if it is not, a need to clarify the geographic scope of the JPA's flood mitigation roles. The next one regarding point C, the JPA's scope has, over the course of time, included to expand the bay shoreline to protect against tidal and sea level rise flooding. If that is the will of the board, that should be clarified in the membership agreement purposes as well. Scrolling down to the next page, there is a description about the JPA's role about its role in emergency situations and its role to quote unquote mitigate them or coordinate emergency response activities. The JPA does play a very important role in collaboration with our emergency operations personnel in our member agencies. But we ourselves do not do emergency response. We do not conduct emergency response activities. And so making that clarification about its appropriate and necessary role would be, I think, very important. I've included 2 bullet points here for the sake of possible consideration. One of these I think has been raised in the past, and that is the implication on flood risk from rising groundwater due to sea level rise. And as Director Burt mentioned, what is the potential impact of catastrophic fire in the upper watershed on sediment transport and other creek dynamics? When we think about flood control, what does it mean if there is a significant change in the characteristic of the upper watershed? So that is the purposes section of the agreement. The powers of the authority continued in paragraph 5. Should the JPA be enabled to establish some kind of a financing district? The JPA may need to acquire, hold, or dispose of real property, easements, for example, or in the case of our recently acquired donated property, the Reller parcel, which is going to be critical for our mitigation requirements in Reach 2. Should the JPA be explicitly empowered to hold, dispose, acquire real property? And should the JPA be explicitly stated that the JPA may hire staff? Right now, it does not call that out explicitly. It may be implicit. It's certainly been the case for the existence of the JPA that staff has been hired, but the agreement is silent on that point. Paragraph 6, member entity approvals and responsibilities. There is a need to reconcile current agreement to current practice. Consistent with a budget approved by independent action of each member entity's governing body, what happens now is the board reviews and then subsequently approves the JPA's operating budget. The board member themselves do not necessarily take this information to their respective governing bodies for ratification prior to the approval of our budget. So our practice and our members' agreement do not reconcile. Same thing with the board votes to approve projects and related contract actions and does not take approval of that through their governing body independently. So this is another opportunity to reconcile practice with our membership agreement. Regarding board members and board meetings, we'd like to ask the board to consider the past year's experience with virtual meetings and to include the option in our members' agreement to continue virtual meetings at the pleasure of the board. In practice, this is another one, the board has not followed the practice of sending a written request for the chair or by the chair to hold a special meeting. There isn't necessarily a written request practice. So we should just reconcile our standard practice with our member agreement. Another alignment with reality is our member agreement now says that there is a secretary among the officers of the board, and that is not the case. So unless the board would like to implement a role of secretary, we should delete this to reconcile to actual practice. That's the conclusion of the outstanding issues. If anyone would like to ask clarifying questions, we can do that, or we can proceed.
Any questions from the clarification of that? Again, our goal here is to, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm not saying these are unimportant issues, but you know, there's just X amount of time today to go through, should we have a secretary or not? I'd like us to kind of focus on the real strategy policy stuff, which is what the board should be doing, and not go line by line. And I'd like to circle back to the funding stuff, because I think that's the elephant in the room. So there's only 45 minutes at most, even 30 for some of us. So
so excellent point. The intent here is not to go through these issues. This is just setting some context. What we really want to do here is just get some direction on the process or the expected timing to resolve these. So let's pivot to that quickly. So any thoughts on or direction to Margaret as to kind of how to work through these issues, the timing of updating this agreement?
Yeah, so Charles, I think that one of the big issues that I think we need to put on the agenda is defining the role of the JPA, you know, with sea level rise. So with all that work, and I think once we have that, a lot of the other ones really are kind of minor things that we could address. But and then I think just set a date so the next few months the document comes up. As far as the process for getting agreement with the other entities, I think in the past it's just been a matter of, you know, having a document that gets circulated first through the staff. I mean, I think there's some precedent for that staff from the different agencies get a chance to review it, the legal people get to review it, and then at some point it comes back to us. So yeah, yeah, because I do agree with Gary. I think the rest of the time we can focus on some of the you know, big issues, definitely the funding plan of some sort.
Yep, okay.
But yeah, it's good to move this forward at some point soon.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So then let's move this on. I'm going to quickly, this is an opportunity. We also wanted to take a break here and see if any members of the public had comments on particularly mission and vision. So if you want to weigh in here on that, yeah, Jerry, go ahead.
I'll be very brief.
Great, thank you.
Several comments, and Margaret, I think it's probably it's sort of quasi wordsmithing. I think I'll just pass them on to you.
Okay.
To incorporate them in your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the brevity. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We had planned a break here because we've been staring at the screen for a long time. I want to offer that opportunity if people want, but people may prefer to try to finish a little sooner. So do we want to keep going? Those who are on screen could nod yes, like we want to keep going, or no, no, we need a break.
One or more of the board members needs to sign off at 11:30. That's the case, then maybe
we should keep going.
You want to just plow ahead? Okay, that's great. So take a moment, look out the window for a second, or stretch your arm. So we do have another meaty topic coming up here, which you folks have all set up extremely well. So in this next section, we want to talk about particularly the costs and funding piece. And the way we want to do that is to focus on this Reach 2 project, which you folks have already done. Margaret's got a few slides on that. And again, we're trying to focus here on sort of what's the process going forward. I think we've already identified the challenge, and it's really getting some thoughts on how do we have this conversation about funding? How do we there's different what are the key elements of it, and what are the key principles of a funding conversation? So again, high level is our focus. So Margaret, do you want to just keep plowing ahead with
I'm
the
going to keep
context?
rolling along here, and I'm going to make quick work of this. However, there are some details that I'd like to focus on. So as you may have seen in past meetings and shared with you from time to time, this is an ongoing snapshot of where we are with project costs. I've highlighted in yellow these three totals. And I want to key in on this number for the Pope Chaucer Bridge is looking like it's low. Let's bump that up to somewhere around 8.2, 8.3 million. The channel improvements between Newell and Euclid, that's all of them excluding West Bayshore. That is probably about the right number. And this number here, the $6 million for the West Bayshore transition flood wall, is in flux. And let me take a moment to go back to the comment I made about hydraulic modeling. We are interested in potentially mothballing that particular piece. It is not needed at this time to handle the flow from Pope Chaucer to the bay. It can, in its present configuration, handle all of the flow, in part because the Reach 1 section is complete. The hydraulic modeling that we're doing in conjunction with information from Stanford is assessing whether there's going to be sediment deposition in an inappropriate or inconvenient or not advantageous manner if we do not widen it. We think from preliminary analysis that the sediment transport is not significantly affected, will not create Reach 1 maintenance headaches for Valley Water and others. So on the proviso that the hydraulic analysis continues, as we are optimistic it will, this $6 million chunk from that, largely from Valley Water's contribution, can be reapplied elsewhere in the project. We will essentially save that $6 million and be able to use that for local match on other things. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the slide of current potential funding. We have for Valley Water, these are the contributions for the various projects. If we look at channel improvements, here, this is a missing piece. The West Bayshore transition flood wall can get moved in part to the channel improvements column, closing a very significant gap there. We have pending grants from the FEMA, Cal OES FEMA HMGP grant. An interesting conversation recently with Ron Miller from Cal OES. He let us know that there are $200 million looking for a home in the HMGP program for qualified projects. I reached out to Mr. Miller and asked if a qualified program that once upon a time had a funding ceiling, did that mean that the funding ceiling could be suspended, and could we, pardon the pun, and could we look at expanding the grant for that project? And his reply was, yes, you can, as long as your benefit cost ratio was still appropriate, was still advantageous. Ours certainly is for the Pope Chaucer Bridge modification. We could more than double our request and still have a very favorable BCR. So we are going to be exploring that avidly here in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll have more information for the board soon. If that happens, we are looking at a better than best case scenario. We will close the funding gap for the channel widening projects. We will significantly close the gap for the Pope Chaucer Bridge. And to go back to Mr. Shikata's point about coordinating with our congressional representatives, as the board knows, we have put our hat in the ring for congressional community project funding for both the Reach 2 project, specifically the Pope Chaucer Bridge, and for the Safer Bay project. In speaking with our congressional representative staffers from Congresswoman Anna Eshu's office, they're interested. Don't know how certain that is, but we've asked for close to $1.5 million for near-term needs for permitting and documentation around easements, which is kind of a critical funding spot. If we get that funding, we don't have a gap. If we have the hydraulic analysis that says that sediment deposition and some other tweaking in the channel widening work is possible, as we think it may be, our best case scenario is no gap or very little gap. So that's, again, assuming that all goes according to plan, but it is looking more optimistic than it was of just a few months ago. As we are moving forward with the Army Corps of Engineers for the CAP 205 program, I think Kevin can elucidate on this, but my understanding is we are about to enter into a study agreement with Army Corps of Engineers. That process is going to take a year, maybe a little bit more than a year, because that's shortened from what they normally take, because we've already done so much preparatory work. So all of the funding from the HMGP grants, all of the funding from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are looking positive. And we are looking at a very positive opportunity to not take on right now the West Bayshore widening element, which is a very expensive element of the project, and applying the Valley Water funding from that to the local funding match for the other elements of the project. Again, pretty close to closing the gap. So I know that's optimistic, and it may be overly optimistic because we cannot foresee all possible ends or all possible permutations at this time. But barring catastrophe, I think we are pretty close to the optimistic best case, even better than best case scenario.
Any clarifying questions about that? That was a lot of numbers pretty quickly. So
right.
Any questions about that?
Yeah, I had one. I apologize. I got lost when you were explaining the reason that we're not going to need that West Bayshore 6 million. Can you repeat that?
You bet, sure. So the West Bayshore Inlet right now, if you recall, when Reach 1 was created, Caltrans put in a fourth barrel underneath Highway 101 and West Bayshore. That was predicated on a design that, as I understand it, sort of assumed the worst case scenario. It presently, that with the 3 barrels open, can presently convey all the flow that's needed because the Reach 1 project was completed. The design was predicated, as I understand, and others can probably correct me, but that design was predicated on current circumstances at the time of not having Reach 1 completed. Now that it has been completed, the water level has been lowered. It's like my analogy that I like to think of is we are now pouring water out of a mason jar instead of a wine bottle. So there is easier flow underneath the bridge and beyond the bridge through Reach 1's channel and downstream flow. So with that enhanced flow capacity beyond the bridge, it's no longer a constriction point. Moreover, there are known cultural resources in that particular area that if we were to do that new flood wall, that new widening area right there to conform the channel wall to the fourth bore, we would incur time and cost probably in excess of the current estimated cost of 6.8 million, 0.08 million. So by prioritizing those dollars, mothballing that project, it certainly doesn't mean we can't do this in the future if in fact there's ever a need for it. But by mothballing that for now, we don't compromise the flow capacity of the creek, and we can reprioritize that $6 million some for other elements of the channel widening or bridge project where that local match is necessary and missing.
So got it. So under what scenario might it be needed in the future based on your explanation? It sounded like it just isn't needed. So I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, and I would, since Kevin has the most experience with this, if Kevin wouldn't mind jumping in and explaining that scenario, I think he's the technical expert there.
Yeah, so let me button up what Margaret said about the change in the need. It was mostly driven by the decision to not convey the full 100-year flow through Reach 2 when we made the decision to protect against the 1998 flood. That changed the conveyance need at West Bayshore from over 8,000 CFS to less than 8,000 CFS because Middlefield Road was not going to be modified. Okay, I'm sorry. Director Burt, what was the second question?
Well, so under what, I think you implied the answer there, under what future scenario might it be needed? Are you saying that if we end up moving toward 100-year protection, it either needs to be upstream detention or that, or something else?
Right. Right. So the Caltrans project was designed to conform with our downstream design flow, and so the inlet upstream of West Bayshore was also designed for that 9,400 CFS design flow. If in the future we or others decide to build projects that convey the full 9,400 CFS through Reach 2 from Middlefield and beyond, then that West Bayshore inlet would need to be installed. Currently, with our design of Reach 2 elements only conveying about 7,650 cubic feet per second, the existing West Bayshore inlet with the downstream project complete and the lower water surface elevation, coupled with the newer technology that Caltrans used to build its bridge deck, which requires less substructure. So the soffit, the bottom of the bridge is higher in elevation, provides for the conveyance that we need to provide protection from the flow that can get to that point with our current design.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any other clarifying questions?
I had a question, and so going back to the best case scenario, and then so the shortfall is 5 million, right? And so, but the formula isn't going to be that we divide that by, or let's just say 6 million. The formula isn't going to be that we divide that by 5, right? There, how that then gets covered by the member agencies is in theory going to not be equal, right? Regarding that shortfall.
Right, and to that point, so my understanding is that Valley Water contributes their share through the Measure S funds. Menlo Park, Menlo Park and East Palo Alto make their contributions through their general funds. Palo Alto, to this point, has pointed to the contributions to Measure S through their residents assessment payments under Measure S, since they are part of the Santa Clara County-wide Measure S assessments, but they do not contribute from their general fund. The San Mateo County Flooding and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District has a very small revenue stream from an established assessment district in the JPA territory that contributes their portion, which is a limited funding stream. So there are different and unequal funding contributions. Some of them constrain the way a member is even able to contribute. And in the future, that may change. For example, the Flooding and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District may in the future establish some kind of general purpose public benefit district that establishes a different kind of funding stream, maybe analogous to the funding that Valley Water provides. But the timing of that remains to be seen. So a lot of the conversation about the funding formula or the funding methodology, I think has to do with both ascribing and attributing and evaluating benefits received, as well as the equitable distribution of or equitable contribution from members based on how they're able to contribute. Reconciling those two, I think, is the challenge before us.
That's an excellent lead into the conversation, I think. So any other clarifying questions? I think Mayor Combs, you've really kind of teed up the conversation that we want to have, which is, so there's uncertainty about how much the shortfall may be, but starting the conversation now about how that shortfall might be addressed seems appropriate. So I think the question that we want to pose, if you can go to the next slide, Margaret, is sort of what approaches are viable, but I think particularly what principles should guide the allocation of benefits and costs among the members, and then some direction on a process here. So I think those really are the key questions. So at a high level, how do we wrestle with this? Both what's the process for doing it, but also what are the principles for wrestling with potential funding shortfall? So any initial thoughts from the board members?
So Gary, are you still there? Because I know that I think you had to leave soon, and you.
Yeah, I'm here. This is an important part of the discussion.
Yeah, I would say if you.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, or I don't know.
Well, I didn't have a comment other than, the Valley Water does have the allocation of money from Measure S.
Okay.
Gary, do you have thoughts about, because yes, you have resources available, but how should this shortfall be allocated among the members? Do you have any thoughts about how staff should start thinking about that, or?
Well, no one will agree. It seems, of course, from Valley Water's perspective, we put ours in, and then everyone should put up equal to that, and then we have a discussion if Valley Water should participate.
So Charles, my, at a, maybe under the third bullet point, direction the staff on process to complete strategy. I think both the numbers, which we have seen to some degree with, some modifications, and some of the, articulation by Margaret, sort of where we are and et cetera. I do feel that this is one of the items that needs to be packaged in some way and brought to the board so that at the board level, we have that discussion. I'm just flashing back a little bit, some years back when I think it's best to have that discussion and as a board come up with some strategies some honest discussions about where we stand, about the shortfalls, you know, how they get distributed, contributions. I think that's important for the board to first have a complete review of this and discussion, and then at that point give some more specific direction. Because
Okay.
I think if we don't do that, I think it could get very confusing if we only operate agency by agency, which those discussions do still take place, I think, when staff gets together, et cetera, but yeah, I think those are going to be difficult discussions. And I think in going back to Pat's questions, even estimating, just being as realistic as possible, like how much could we really We're very realistic and very.
All right, Ruben, we lost you a little bit there. Can you say that again? You froze for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No. So basically, I think, you know, packaging this item, bringing it to the board as soon as possible so that we can engage in this kind of discussion and just be very frank and realistic where we stand, what the challenges are, and then yeah.
If I may ask, Chair Abrica, would you, this seems like a topic that would lend itself well to a study session. Would you like staff to set up a separate study session, separate from a regular board meeting, the single topic of which is this question around funding? Well,
You know, I don't want to add any more meetings than we have to, but unless there's other really pressing items, you know, it could be the single topic that we discuss at the next meeting with other issues that may be important.
Okay.
And
I mean,
I'm sorry. Just waiting back in here, Margaret's breakdown on the prospects for narrowing or even eliminating the funding gap were very helpful. We still can't have the visibility that all of us would like at this time, but it seems that kind of almost on a monthly basis, we're getting better visibility and perhaps better news. And this has been this funding issue has been a contentious issue off and on for this organization since its inception. And in its early years, it was highly contentious and it was really almost destructive to the organization in the early mid 2000s based on that, because San Mateo County and the member bodies didn't have a funding source, and Santa Clara County did, and so it was very asymmetrical. When we had the downstream project, we were struggling with this, and in the end, we were able to get grants that were really grants that were based upon East Palo Alto being a beneficiary of that element of the project, and that really removed a lot of the contention. We basically, as a board, said, okay, we'll attribute those grants to East Palo Alto's contribution, and that's how we kind of work this out at a kind of rough level. I really think that at this point in time, if we try to resolve a proportionality to an undefined amount, somewhere between 20 million and zero, and go into a battle over that, we're going to be in a battle that may not be necessary. And at the same time, the outcome of how we would all feel about this is very different depending on the scale of the gap. And so as much as I would like to have this resolved, I don't think we should force feed this right now. We could have some conceptual discussions, but I just can envision that it would be counterproductive. And we need to have a few more of these pieces fall into place before we enter into that perhaps tougher negotiation, or perhaps it's going to be an easy one, depending on what happens.
That's a helpful perspective. Dave, do you have something to add there?
I mean, along those lines, I mean, one thing I don't have a good sense for is, you know, really what is our deadline for resolving this? You know, so, you know, how much time do we have to see how these other grant opportunities work themselves out? And, you know, in particular, you know, I think it's been our experience with the Army Corps that everything takes a lot longer than anticipated.
That's a good question of how urgent is this? Does anybody have a thought on that off the top of their head?
Right. Director Pine, I think that's a great question. I think I will need to get back to you, to get back to the board and the community at large after consulting with Kevin and Tess about when we expect grants to come in and when we expect specific expenses, specific outlays to happen. I don't have that at my fingertips. I don't want to put Kevin or Tess on the spot right now to get you a, you know, what is the deadline to resolve this, but we can get back to you with that. Our grants, our funding comes in phases. There may not be a clear deadline, but if there is, I'll get back to you.
And if I may just sort of add what Margaret said is we will need to have all the funding in place before we can bid the project. And our current schedule is dependent on the Newell Road Bridge schedule. So that right now it's at 2023 to start construction of Newell Road Bridge. So we can start in 2023 to construct the widening sites with the Pope Chaucer following in 2024. And that's a very broad brush view of the timeline we're looking at.
So, figuring the financing out by 2023. So you kind of have a year and a half to figure that out. Is that how I would interpret? I'm talking broad brush.
Yeah, I would actually back that up to the end of 2022 because we'll need to have movement in place to prepare for going out to bid.
This is Drew, if I could chime in here. So I totally hear where Pat is coming from in the sense of you know, why have a fight that you don't need to have a fight? Although I would say that the end of 2022 is coming very quickly, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that, like, as long as we avoid that discussion, the very viability of the project is in question. And so with regards to the downstream project, you lucked out and there came in sources of revenue and money that you were able to subscribe to East Palo Alto. And so that sort of diffused that situation. But it seems as though, and I wasn't here, it was a disagreement that went to the very core of what the JPA was trying to achieve. And I can see that being replayed again, but then there not being this last minute Hail Mary pass that saves the day. And so I would say that, like, while we don't need to resolve it, I think avoiding the conversation is going to be problematic. And it puts a question mark over the project. Because again, like, even if we're talking about Menlo Park's contribution, obviously, Drew, I don't get to say what that is. I have to go back to my council and there has to be 3 votes to say what that is. And so there is a dependency there. So even if I could say that, like, oh, well, you know, I know that there's a price that would be too rich for us, I can't even say it could be a lower price for the majority of my colleagues. And so avoiding it, having these dependencies, I think, again, like I say, it's fine. We can avoid that fight. But I think for a lot of people, then again, the very viability of the project and its success and its eventual completion is in question.
So I would say that Yeah, I think this is a useful discussion to, yeah, definitely not avoid the conversation for sure, because I think anytime you talk about money and, having the ways of solving it, I think it's important. It's important for the communities to hear that we're trying to figure out how to put this together. And also having a timeline, which, could change, but at least have a tentative timeline of where we stand. And, over the next few months, that could change. There could be better news, there could be worse news. But I do think that we do need to have sooner than later a kind of conversation that we're having today. But obviously today we can't engage in all the details of it, just so that we laid the groundwork for addressing any potential conflicts that will surface. So it's not necessarily, I agree, I don't think I'm not looking for a fight. None of us are looking for a fight, but the reality of this, it has an inherent sort of, conflictive part, but it also has a lot of good positive things for us to get through. So, in that respect, I think it is good to have a more detailed, comprehensive discussion like we're having now, understanding that it's not the final. We don't have to decide right there and then, but just because it keeps changing, but we could come up with some strategies that as a JPA, we try to address it. Again, my concern is that if we only start dealing agency by agency, then that's not going to work. We have to think of it as we are a JPA, and then see where the different agencies sort of fit in.
So if I can summarize this quickly, what I think I've heard is that given the timeline, it is not an urgent thing that has to be resolved right away, which takes some pressure off, which can help avoid hard conflicts. I heard, I think 2 or 3 different options for approaches to funding, sort of based on ability to pay, based on equal allocation to all 5 entities, and based on benefits were 3 optional approaches. There may be others. So that seems like a fairly easy place to start, is explore conceptually what the options might be. And then put together a timeline of how you might go from a conceptual approach to the specifics that you need to have by the end of 2022. So I think I heard a lot of, some good ideas that I think I could work with Margaret and kind of lay out sort of a process of how you might go through these conversations. Does that sound reasonable? I think I heard everybody say we needed to start talking about this. And I heard everybody acknowledge that it could be a hard conversation eventually. But I also heard we probably have a little time to work through a lot of issues. That seems sensible? Gary, you're still on, and I know you have to go. So.
Sensible.
Okay. Margaret, anything, is that enough direction to you, or is that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Give him 1 minute. Why don't you practice little baseball? Banning or grounders.
Okay, we're playing baseball now.
Oh, sorry.
So Gary, you're ready for your show and tell.
Yeah, I'll do some show and tell. You want to see some show and tell? Let's see.
You have to take off your background.
Hold on. There's baseball going on here, folks. Can anyone see baseball?
Oh, you have to take the background off.
Oh, shoot. I'll do that in a second.
Okay.
All right, so I'm still listening as much as I can.
Okay, there we go.
Some baseball going on.
Is that McKelvey Park?
It isn't, but that's a beautiful flood control project if there is one.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So just to loop back and close out this conversation, any final thoughts? Pat, I know you unmuted a moment ago. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I was just going to say I recognize the dilemma as Drew laid it out there, and I'm not anticipating that we're going to punt this down to 2022 discussion. I'll wait kind of Margaret laying out kind of the knowns and unknowns and when we think we might get some additional answers. But my rough sense is that we're going to know a lot more by the fall than we do now. And I also think that a discussion, along the lines of what you had described, Charles, about kind of different formula approaches, or in reality, we're probably going to have some hybrid of that emerge if there's a gap. I think that's useful, and that we can wade in there. And I just think that there's a justifiable wish to have a resolution, but I just don't think it's ripe yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other thoughts? Any staff want to weigh in, and just from your local perspective, what you need this group to be thinking about? Nothing?
Starla, Brad, Ed?
Well, I would just like to add that I think it's been a really thoughtful conversation, and I think to the extent that we do know more about the grant fundings and funding in general by the fall, that seems like a good sort of check-in point, so that we're all able to better understand what the scale is of the potential contributions. But thank you, really helpful to hear from all of you today.
Ed?
Perhaps just one thought along those lines. If it is helpful, then I'm sure, certainly on behalf of Palo Alto and perhaps other cities, happy to work with Margaret on some scenarios. I know we've played some of that out, especially to the extent it requires lead time, or at least understanding the lead times that agencies will need to make decisions if, potentially under some funding approaches, it could take more than a year or two for us to pull anything together. Again, not sure exactly what scenario that would be, but that might be an exercise worth undertaking.
Great, Ed. Thank you. I'll follow up with you.
Great, excellent. Any other thoughts? Okay. I want to, again, this is an opportunity for some members of the public to weigh in if you have thoughts. This is obviously a meaty subject for the board, but anybody want to raise a hand there? Jerry.
Thank you. I hope I'm not the only public member watching here, but so first off, good news about the funding, Margaret. Thank you for both the possibility of future funding, but also that rethinking of the order of how things get done in the creek. So doing away with moving the money towards the Reach 2 project from the wall at 101 was brilliant. I like that. That was an excellent move, and I hope it all pans out.
That was, I can't take credit for that. That came from staff.
Pass it on to staff if they're listening. I see Tess.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's great. So creative thinking is also part of what we need to do going forward. So Pat, I totally agree with you about the struggle over in the past that over money, and that did. We don't want to see that again. It was a very challenging thing to participate in and to watch, and it did. I think the organization is more mature now and settled, and people know each other a little better, and they've had some experience. So I hope that won't happen. And I also agree with Drew that we really need to think about this, not just let it idle, but to set a timeline and a plan of how to move forward. And my suggestion, or following up, I think on Ruben's suggestion, is to make it a part of each meeting, so that you're biting off little pieces of it and then you move ahead and you get settled with what you've thought about that in the meeting before, and then you can move onward like that. I find it often a very difficult process. Is a lot easier if you break it up into small pieces and have smaller conversations. And the last thing I would like to suggest is that whatever approach for all these things come up, these approaches, let's say, you should also be thinking about fallbacks, or what is another way to do it in case the principles that you set up and the guidelines don't really fit a particular situation. For whatever unknown thing will come up, and there will be those. You need to be thinking about, well, that was a great idea and I'd love to make that work, but maybe we're going to have to tweak it a little bit. So this is actually a fairly exciting thing to think about if you're not thinking totally about the money. And that's not the thing that's sitting right in your face, but you're thinking about principles of working together to reach a common goal. And if you hold that in mind, I think we'll be successful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. Any final thoughts from the group here on this subject? Okay. The next thing we wanted to talk about, and I think we could just talk about this very briefly, Margaret, and I think I'm really going to turn to you to just say, sort of what have you heard here that potentially influences sort of your organizational capacity that you want to go work on? Just any thoughts about that?
Sure. I think the outcome for me is kind of a steady as she goes. I did want to acknowledge that I think Jerry Hearn pointed out, and certainly the board members know this, that the little blue engine that could, when we come into construction of our projects, we are going to be hard pressed. And I commit to the board to keep everyone posted with how we are going to optimize staff and if there are going to be organizational capacity issues. I do not want the quality or reputation of the organization to suffer because of our ambition. I just wanted to also mention to the board that we continue with, as I shared and have continued to share at board meetings, we continue with organizational capacity building. So that was all that I wanted to share in this slide. It's a little bit like, making sure the foundations are stable as we move along.
Great. Any thoughts from the rest of you about anything we talked about today and its influence on, the organizational capacity, or things that you want Margaret to be thinking about? Okay. So this is good. We have 12 minutes to review our action items. So we go to the next slide. So wanted to review the next steps, action items, any assignments, thoughts about process and so forth. And maybe I'll jump over to our flip chart. So let me seize control here. So been trying to track a few of the action items, but sorry, one sec. There we go. As we go, there were definitely some things around the vision and mission, really particularly defining the role of the JPA with regard to sea level rise. And then how does that influence the vision and mission language, and actually also a process for updating the agreement. So I should add that. Then the outcome here on this funding discussion is coming up with a process, ideally somewhat incrementally, that goes from options to refined plans over the next year and a half or so, right?
Yeah.
So Margaret, is there anything else that you heard as kind of particular assignments here that you wanted to capture?
I think on a tactical level, including these elements, either one by one or in pieces in each of the board meetings, in the monthly board meetings, so that we continue to address this stepwise instead of trying to eat the apple all in one bite for each of these
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other thoughts from the board members?
Great job.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Gary.
So, Charles, I was just gonna, I think we discussed it a little bit, but you'll, I guess between you and Margaret, you'll help produce at least kind of a summary of,
Yeah.
you know, what took place today. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but at least a summary document for the board or, you know, for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yes.
So yeah, here we've been tracking all these comments here as we've been going on the whiteboard. I didn't show you all of that, but yeah. So that's definitely a follow up. Is kind of here's what we heard from everybody, and you know, steps and recommendations going forward. And I think particularly fleshing out this funding one, since it's, you know, such a big issue for you, that'll be a critical component of those recommendations.
Yeah, and then just leaving a few minutes before 12 on the issue of the participation with the Stanford one. So I just want to,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, I want to thank everyone for their participation. I think it's been very, very productive session. So.
Yeah, great discussion. So Margaret, I think you might want to pull up the slide set so you have the closing. So any final thoughts from board members or staff just before we kind of close the retreat portion of this? I would agree with Ruben that the conversation was really good. I totally appreciate that you all stepped in and offered perspectives. That's a hard thing to do in this virtual world, but really helps the conversation a lot. So.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're wrapped on the retreat, Chair Abrica, we'll move on to item number 8.
So, yes, at the last meeting, we left pending the, you know, the way to address having participation from the JPA on the invitation from Stanford. So I did consult with our counsel, Tricia, and, you know, her suggestion was that that the chair make appointments. And so, because we're not officially, you know, Stanford's not asking us, and we're not officially representing the JPA, but we want to have at least a couple of people be engaged in that process. So, so I had a couple of suggestions how we want to proceed. And, you know, I'm completely open to that, although, as she said, or suggested, that the easiest way would be for the chair to appoint 2 people. So one option is that it would be the chair and the vice chair who participate from the JPA. That's one way. The other way would be, I thought of the chair and then draw lots from the other 4 people, or it could just be draw lots from all 5 of us. So I'm open to, you know, any ideas or comments from the rest of the board, since that'll be our decision. So
yeah, hey,
anybody have a
Ruben? Did you? I was just going to quickly suggest, Ruben, if you're interested in participating tonight, I certainly think that you should. My, you know, recommendation would be that we have 1 person from the San Mateo County side and possibly 1 person from the Santa Clara County side, given that you have 2 sides of the creek being represented. And from my perspective, I'm totally supportive of if you're interested, that being you as the chair, and then you representing the San Mateo County side, and seeing who on the Santa Clara side would be interested in doing it. But again, I don't want to speak for Dave because maybe.
Yeah,
I would say,
I'm comfortable with that approach. Ruben, I think there'd be a lot of benefit for you to serve on it, given that you were so active in the first Searsville group.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah, that's definitely another suggestion there, Drew, that I mean, I think as the chair this year, I think it would be beneficial, for me to be there. And so now then, if we go with that, then I guess between Gary and Pat, maybe if one of you wants to volunteer, or I'm trying to avoid just appointing someone, but if you guys flip a coin or something,
I haven't heard from Gary on this. I would be glad to serve, having spent with you, what was it, 2 years on this?
Yeah, that's true.
The last time. But if Gary had a strong inclination to wanting to do it, then I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I don't see Gary still in the meeting.
So I know the first meeting is on the 4th. So let's, just to be sure, then for now, I think if Pat, if you and I can join in on the 4th, and then we can go for there, because, it's flexible as long as there's only 2 of us, no more than 2.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that takes care of that. And well, I think with that, we will adjourn and enjoy the rest of the day. And we'll see you at our next meeting. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.